So very quickly, if my beard looks weird to you, it's because I fucked up shaving. I don't know if you've ever shaved before. FYI, if you ever have to shave your beard that you would hypothetically have and you have a clip guard on, make sure it's not 1 millimeter, because that doesn't preserve your beard. I fucked up. All right, so I got a couple stories I want to talk to you about today. One that just happened and one that happened on Sunday that I didn't get to include in the episode. And let's start with the big story around AOC and the House Oversight Committee. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez lost her bid to be the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee on a secret ballot totaling 131 to 84. She lost to Gary Connolly, a 74-year-old House member from Virginia who currently has cancer. Now, obviously, the age and the health of Connolly versus the younger Cortez is the big contrast here. And again, of course, we're not trying to dog Connolly for having cancer. That's not a bar or disqualifying for office. Nobody is saying that. But the big story here is that Nancy Pelosi directly intervened in this vote, calling for people specifically to reject AOC's bid for ranking member. Pelosi specifically lobbied for AOC's defeat here, and progressives and leftists are furious at what seems like the Democratic Party's disdain for a fairly large section of their base. And this comes after weeks of pundits and people who can't read a fucking room commiserating in article after article about why Kamala Harris lost, shifting the blame to identity and woke politics when the elephant in the room is knocking over the ottoman which has Liz Cheney on it. I'm sorry, Liz, but you're there. And it is reasonable to watch people get frustrated with the Democratic Party as they do so much to essentially gatekeep leadership from people who seem to have some of the strongest positioning for the future of the party itself. That emphasizes the disconnect between the older guard with the broader public. But also, I don't think that this decision is a particularly good one for strategy if you're the establishment type. I also think it's oversimplifying the power dynamics at play to just throw your hands into the air and go, oh, the Democratic Party is fucking joke. We tend to go through the same 5 to 7 points or takeaways every time a political party plays politics. But I think that response always leans on cynicism that like, oh my God, nothing will ever change, even when that bad decision may actually be indicative of the tides shifting. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the Dems, AOC, and what this decision means beyond the surface level stuff that we've seen. Before we do that, I do want to mention a lot of people have been asking me about this. This is Magic Mind. It's a little bit of a supplement nootropic thing that I take. I take it instead of pre-workout a lot of the time. Basically, I wanted something a little bit more healthy to jumpstart my brain instead of just pre-workout all the time. I asked my manager and he got me this, and then they saw the show and they wanted to sponsor it. So yeah, today's show is sponsored by Magic Mind. So Magic Mind contains 100% of your daily recommended vitamin C and D. It's got a bunch of really great ingredients in it like ashwagandha and matcha green tea. And I thought it was going to taste a little weird when I first had it, like a wheatgrass shot, but it was actually kind of like orange juice. So I've been taking it every day. And the best part about it is it doesn't like overwhelm you like caffeine would. It's not meant to replace coffee or anything in your daily routine. It's actually supposed to be in addition to your daily routine. And honestly, since I've started using it, I've been a lot more focused. It has a nice little pep in my step in the morning when I got to record. It tastes kind of nice, and you can mix it with whatever you want as well if you want to have it over ice or with like oat milk or something. And if you go to magicmind.com/Zed and enter in the code Zed, you can get 20% off a one-time purchase of Magic Mind or 48% off a subscription. 48% off? Wow, that's like my bank account after buying holiday shit this year. But honestly, I've really been liking it so far. I think it's a great product. Go to magicmind.com/Zed, enter in the code Zed, and get some peace of mind. All right. Okay, so first off, let's get something straight. This was a vote to be ranking member on the House Oversight Committee. That's the leading member on the Democratic side of the committee. But it doesn't mean that AOC has no power within it or that she has lost her seat on the Oversight Committee. I've seen a lot of really confusing headlines portraying it that way, very clearly for clickbait. You're not fucking slick there. Her work is still going to be instrumental on that committee. She holds a lot of political capital there. The main issue I think here is Pelosi. Pelosi has been waging this weird behind the scenes war with AOC on off years to maintain what she considers a pragmatic line. They've had a lot of tensions within the party, but also been supportive of each other at times. But also, before we go any further, I do want to establish a few things about Nancy Pelosi because this story is going to be kind of critical of her. So before we get too cynical, Nancy Pelosi is not just some old witch who emerges every 2 years to siphon the souls out of progressive party members and Republicans, okay? Nancy Pelosi is probably historically one of the best fundraisers as well as operationally efficient Democratic organizationalists ever. She can whip votes. She understands very easily how to push and manipulate levers behind the scenes and lean on party dynamics. If she's ever put into a position where she needs it, she can make the sitting president drop out of his re-election bid. She's very, very good at her job and pushing Democratic priorities through. She's also gloriously and historically bad at optics. Oh my God. Nancy Pelosi has some of the worst fumbles at political optics and just messaging work in history. Oh, look, here she is now. Hey, remember the time at the height of the Colbert Report where Stephen Colbert was just obliterating Republican talking points and Jon Stewart became a reasonable counterweight to conservative talk radio, and then Nancy Pelosi was like, don't go on their shows. Oh, great job, Nancy. And then years later, she went on Colbert. That's what we're dealing with. And this whole decision, by every stretch of the imagination, is indicative of the powers of Nancy Pelosi. Because I don't think like the Democratic Party is losing touch with reality. I think Nancy Pelosi's wing is. And I don't think that influence is going to have a long tail. It's very clear who the power brokers are on the Democratic bench. AOC, Buttigieg, Jasmine Crockett, maybe Gavin Newsom, who will enshrine abortion rights and then go kill Robin in front of Batman right afterwards. All of these names have far more reach and weight within new media that Nancy Pelosi just does not. In terms of engagement with the public, AOC commands a broader respect and name recognition within the Democratic base and headlines. Even if establishment Dems keep trying to position their own power and hold the dam from breaking, AOC's megaphone to control public sentiment and push the conversation is still pretty unmatched. Not to mention, again, she's still on the committee, so it's not hard for her to leverage clips of her speaking and grilling different individuals over the next 2 years to be the driving force of what the Democratic conversation is. Pelosi and Connolly do not have as broad of that power in new media. Nowhere near it. And I mentioned before, Pelosi is why Biden stepped aside. Well, that's because she was working in concert with a runaway narrative. I'm not saying AOC is the most popular politician in the world, all right? A lot of people know her, but she also does have some unfavorables nationally. I'm not going to lie about that. But that has not stopped other transformative political figures from playing the long game against the establishment and finding their own voice. Well, wait a minute. Wait, who is this young lady? Right here, who's this young lady? Who's this? So here's a fun little history lesson for you. So Nancy Pelosi in the 80s and 90s had a very similar problem to what AOC is having with her now. You see, in the 80s and 90s, Nancy Pelosi was written off as a housewife fundraiser. Yes, she had political connections through her family. Let's not discount that. But she was waved off aggressively as being too liberal for the party at large because she was from San Francisco, where everybody just thought was like gay Mecca, where all those fucking commie bastards from Berkeley are from. Nancy Pelosi even had her own centrist establishment asshole who wants the pragmatic approach to fight with. His name was Steny Hoyer. Hoyer was he's still alive. Why am I saying was? Hoyer is a longtime rival of Pelosi and represented a lot of the same clashes you hear today from leftists versus liberals. And a lot of the stuff that she's fighting AOC with was what she fought Hoyer with: strategic alliances to kind of undermine him in his running, making compromises to shift the broader goals of the Democratic Party. She beat him for House Whip, endorsed his rival for the majority leader, and then eventually worked her way up to be the first female Speaker of the House. Now, there are stark differences between AOC and Pelosi, but also stark similarities to the problems they were both facing, which brings me to my point. This is a long game. It's more than just who gets the ranking member seat or who gets the press time or who shivved who. There are so many factors at play. if you're progressive and you have progressive goals, there are multiple different ways you can leverage this situation and even look at it to figure out, okay, what do we do now? How do we move forward? How do we convince people to support positions that we feel are beneficial for everybody? What are the messaging needs that need to happen to bring people into our coalition? And it is so fucking tiring that we don't do any of that and instead have the same take over and over again. God, these guys are such a joke. There's no point. Let's just corrode into a hut and die. Just the cynical doomerism and none of the solutions. And I get it. Listen, this is a joke, right? It's a comical example of gatekeeping and the old guard just wanting to be old. But when I see comments like, Zed, do you think it's at all possible for this country to shift progressive? It just feels like every time we try to move forward, we're called insane and pulled right back. Or I miss the old AOC, full of innocence and fire for progressive ideas, not this husk that is left after getting beaten by corporate Democrats under the table. So what? What are you talking about, husk? Look, I'm not trying to call these people out. They're engaging and they're being honest, and I appreciate that. I appreciate people speaking their mind on this channel. But look, to both points. First, the latter one. AOC says inconsistencies, of course, but a lot of material positions that she has align with most of the left most of the time. I know we want to play purity test as our favorite politician or band gets more famous, and then we get a little more upset that they're not the same firebrand we liked. But branding changes over time, and strategy around that branding changes as well. And secondly, if we're going to go back to 2005, do you know how progressive people were back in 2005? Like what their views of intersectional ideas were back then? You know, I couldn't even tell people I was Muslim back then for fear of losing work or opportunities. If we're talking about what progress has actually been made since then, before we go into this redux, let's actually go through it. Views and legislation around cannabis, same-sex marriage legislation, open content ecosystem. There were so many gatekeepers that stopped you from even being able to speak your mind. Broader cultural support for unionization and the labor movement. A much more open understanding of certain foreign conflicts. Try going back in time and telling anybody about Israel and Palestine back then. Let me know how that conversation goes for you. All of those are more significantly progressive than they were 20 years ago. Oh my God, it's been 20 fucking years? Holy shit. Listen, it's been said a million times, but building the world that you want and seeing progressive ideas is a process. It's a process for anybody trying to get anything done. People thinking advocacy against injustice is just some destination you get to is why so many activists get frustrated when they hear, oh, Martin Luther King's legacy is he marched, he did the I Have a Dream speech, and then he died. That's it. No. Obviously, there's a lot more to titanic, transformative figures like Malcolm X and George Carlin and Tupac and fucking Lincoln. All of those people fundamentally brought us some form of progress towards better ideals. But they were also wildly fucking inconsistent, like all of those people. It just happens. The world is in the middle of this huge change and a huge anti-incumbency bias. I would argue it's great to be skeptical of institutions and hold them to account. But I would also say in the middle of that, don't get swept up in the hype. Because to some people, being cynical is being real. A lot of those cynics will recommend books, but no action and no engagement with any of the systems that could materially make changes happen. And some of these assholes will build content platforms to feed into your misery because it's fucking profitable. I think it sucks that AOC got gatekept and that a lot of Democratic establishment types are out of touch. And I'm going to shit talk them and everybody else because I'm here to work. But also, that's not forever. Parties change. Political winds change. Your version of what's progressive may be conservative 10 years from now. Ask Nancy Pelosi how that feels. Look, we'll get to a day with ranked choice voting and shit and a bazillion political parties. And people will complain then too. Trust me, people love to complain. I've gone through like 15 different versions of mainline Street Fighter titles over the last 15 years. No one is ever fucking happy. And then once a new one comes out, they were like, why can't we do what we did a year ago? We were happy. No, you weren't. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But either way, this is a process. And in that process, we take L's, we take W's, and we take time. That process takes time. Let me know what you think in the comments. Lastly, I have one more story I recorded on Sunday that I couldn't tell you about. I almost got hacked. It's pretty bad. I think it's an important thing to bring up with everybody, but here it is. So if you don't know, outside of rapping the news and then giving shit to Ben Shapiro for 30 minutes and stuff, I'm a pretty well-known member of the fighting game community. I do all the music for Evo. I've been pretty prominent in making music for the fighting game scene over the last decade or so. If you ever saw the Street Fighter 3DS commercial, that was me rapping it. I'm the guy rapping at the end of Mortal Kombat. So I'm pretty well-known there in addition to doing all this other shit that I do. And this last week, me and a bunch of other influencers for the fighting game community all received private DMs on Twitter from different people claiming to work with some pretty well-known brands. For me, it was HyperX. HyperX makes these really cool gaming peripherals and headphones. I mean, they're not sponsoring this episode right now, but I just want to give you some context. And they've worked with a few people I know. So I'm like, oh, they must have gotten my information. So I talked to this guy, apparently Lasai Willett. He was like, hey, I saw your email and your info on YouTube, and I wanted to hit you up here and say, do you want to work with us on a sponsorship integration? That's happened before. People have hit me up on Twitter for that, and it's become this really, really cool thing. And I was like, sure, I would love to work with HyperX. Could you hit up the business email in my account as well? And then immediately I was like, okay, who is this guy? All right, he joined like a decade ago to Twitter, so that seems like a pretty good sign. And then when you look up on LinkedIn, you can see his profile there, Lasai Willett. He works at HyperX, and he's retweeting a bunch of HyperX stuff. I'm still a little skeptical of Lasai, so I call Alex Valle, who's a super well-known fighting game guy. His company was previously affiliated with HyperX. He calls somebody from HyperX. They tell me, yes, Lasai Willett does work with us on brand sponsors and integrations. If he's reaching out like that, that would seem like it was probably legit. He doesn't know specifically if Lasai is doing that, but it seems like something Lasai would do. And again, this seems to check out. Alex knows and works with these people. Monday comes along. He still hasn't hit up the email, but he sends me a link to an NDA with a small key that's supposed to give me access to my specific NDA. For those of you who haven't worked with a lot of digital NDAs like that would make sense because, hey, it's another security precaution, especially when you work with games. There are some documents that are cordoned off by codes or different kind of things. I looked up the site, it checked out. I looked over the NDA, but I didn't sign it immediately because I wanted to talk with my manager first. And this guy was being really cagey about contacting him. So I sent him my manager's number as my manager asked, and then he was like, okay, well, I'll call him eventually. Cool. But then 2 days later, I got another Twitter message, this time from someone completely different who works with AKG microphones. If you don't know what AKG microphones are, they're incredible studio microphones, podcast microphones. AKG is one of the biggest names in the space. And I was like, that's awesome. My videos have been going viral recently. The last episode's rap was really good. She liked it before she messaged me. I look into her as well. Her account's been around for 10 or 11 years. Everything seems to check out on the surface. And she's like, hey, we would love to work with you. We actually already contacted your email. That'll become important in a second. And for some reason, it didn't go through, so we're contacting you here. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That would be amazing. They want an integration. They want me to test out a microphone. And I'm like, this seems really great. I could do that for Freestyle the News. What a great opportunity. A little too great of an opportunity. Because again, for some reason, she wants me to immediately sign an NDA. And I was like, this conversation seems familiar. So then I go over to her LinkedIn page, and yes, there is a woman named Vanessa Mering who works with an entertainment company that's affiliated with AKG. But she hasn't worked with AKG Audio proper in a long fucking time. And her Twitter bio says she is global marketing and brand management for AKG. That's a little weird because if you work with an agency, you would put your agency name first there, not just the brand that you're working with. I would assume you would be working with multiple brands under an agency. I've done agency work before. I can't say that I work for Capcom. I can just say that I've worked with Capcom. So that sets off a little bit of a red flag. So then I type in, I forget the exact wording, but Twitter DM scam or sponsorship scam. And lo and fucking behold, comes up Lasai Willett with another creator in screenshots explaining that he also tried to talk to Lasai to get him to email. And then Lasai sent him the same link that he sent me. And when you look at Lasai's page and even Vanessa's page, It's just retweets of their companies. If you work as a brand marketing manager, I don't want to be an asshole, but most brand marketing managers kind of think they're the shit. Most of the way it's harmless. People are like, I'm really proud of the career I have. It's great getting to do this stuff. They'll show them at cons or working with influencers. They will do things to promote their own brand. They understand the importance of branding. But none of it, just retweets. And when I read more into what this scam is, apparently that NDA link, when you type in that code, apparently puts something on your computer and gives them access in some really nefarious ways. And then I go back to Vanessa, who messaged me about AKG, and I was like, hey, actually, I'm really uncomfortable with signing an NDA over Twitter. You need to email us. And then she mentions, we've actually emailed you before, and our email seems to be having some problems, which is very sus. But then she just sends me the link. And it's the same link from the same company, along with another hex key. I immediately ghost both of them. A couple days later, maybe 1 or 2 days later, 5 separate fighting game content creators have their YouTubes hacked from the exact same scam. Their YouTubes are taken over and used to push some weird fucking crypto coin. And what makes this so much more insidious is that when they tried to do it to me, they didn't just do it with a guy from HyperX. They saw that I was worried that they weren't emailing me, and they tailored their message to be like, actually, we did email you, to try to coerce me into doing it. They also tailored what was specifically trying to sponsor my channel. They specifically picked a microphone company because they know I am a rapper. So this wasn't some weird bot. It was a very targeted attack, especially because people within my community were immediately affected. The reason I'm making this a story on today's show is because this is probably one of the most sophisticated phishing scams I've kind of seen. And I worked for Apple. Okay? Because not only did they pick real people and try to make sure that the background's checked out, not only was their grammar and the way they approached you very, very realistic, but also the accounts were like 10 fucking years old. It had a pretty long back trail and some pretty key indicators that, yeah, of course they work for these companies. Again, I even messaged my friend who worked with HyperX before, and they thought it checked out too. Now, thankfully, a lot of those fighting game creators have gotten their channels back. But please, if you are out there, take this as a reminder, be really, really, really careful about somebody who approaches you and wants to skip the line. Because I was close to signing that NDA just to move things along. I didn't do it. I usually don't do it because I'm very apprehensive about this stuff without confirmation from my management team. And I'm glad I have that step. Have a series of steps in place so that if somebody reaches out to you for a sponsorship or payment or whatever, they have to go through the proper channels. Because if too good to be true really is true, then it's worth the wait, or else it's just a weird crypto scam. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, or if you've ever been approached by this kind of stuff. Be really careful out there, guys. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. We're going to have a new Griff Watch this week. I'm recording it tomorrow. And we're probably going to have the last Freestyle the News of the year on Sunday. Gearing up for vacation. Anyway, my name is Zaid Tabani. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all soon. Let's go.